Every person has a journey, a reason for being who they are. Have you ever looked at someone and wondered, who really is this person? How did they get here? What's their story? Well, that's why this podcast was created, to listen to other people's life stories. Welcome to the My Story podcast. I'm your host, Ari. Welcome back to another episode of the My Story podcast. As you can probably tell, I obviously have a new guest. But this is really interesting. This episode is going to be really interesting because this guest, mostly all of my guests are my friends at this point, but this is someone I would never guess I would gain as a friend. And I actually have, and she has been a blessing in my life. And I'm excited to get to know her more through this podcast. So who are you? Who is this guest? For those on YouTube, you already know, but who are you, guest?
So, I'm so excited. You're going to make me cry.
So, it's Maddox. No, I'm just joking. Maddox Murphy in the house.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
You have, like, tears in your eyes.
Yeah, you were just making me emotional. Okay.
I do mean it, though. Like, we can talk about this later, but
yeah, we can go
you are a friend of mine now, and we're friends, and it's cool, and just excited to have you here.
Aww,
so
thanks for having me.
Yay! So, okay, state your full name. No, I'm just joking. What's your name? Tell us about a bit. Who is Maddox?
So I'm Maddox Murphy, and kind of a interesting thing about my name is Maddox is my grandma's maiden name. And then my middle name is Stark, which is my mom's maiden name.
Yeah,
so I'm just like a whole bunch of last names, but there's a lot of like family
Okay, but
ties.
Your grandma from which side? Like mom or dad?
Dad.
Okay.
And then my mom's side. So we've got like both.
Both in your name.
Together, yeah.
That's actually kind of cool though.
Yeah.
Because you have the history of both families within just your name.
Yes.
So you have a lot to say with just your name, and you thought you wouldn't. So
it's kind of a fun story to tell.
It's a fun fact, but also it carries a lot of weight.
It does.
To just like in your parents' perspective, to have one child carry two family names, it's something beautiful as well. So that's really nice.
Yes.
So obviously a couple of people already know Maddox. She's a current editor-in-chief of The Arrow. We just had Lily a couple weeks ago. But besides editor-in-chief, who really is Maddox?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say I have always kind of made it like a big thing in my life. My mom has always told us like to choose joy every day, and that's kind of like what I feel like I've always tried to live by. And obviously I get in my bad moods and everything, but I do think that like being joyful is a choice, and that's something that I really try to do every day. And I try to make everyone feel loved, and that's always been something I would say. As far as who I am on an everyday basis, I work a lot here. The editor-in-chief role has been awesome. I love to spend time with my friends and my family, and my dog, Tucker.
Oh my God. Tucker is the cutest dog in existence.
My little baby boy.
Oh my God. I'm probably going to put a picture of him somewhere when I
Tucker.
edit it. Tucker right here. He's so cute, guys. Wait till you see it. It's just amazing.
Yes, I got him end of June, beginning of July.
Okay.
So I've had him for a couple months now, but he's like literally become my like whole world.
It's so cute. Oh my God. I don't blame you.
Yes. But yeah, I am pretty busy all the time, but that's kind of always how I've been growing up. So I think it's in a weird way kind of how I like thrive. But yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of aspects to you is what you're basically saying. What made you want to pursue writing? Because you're editor-in-chief now, you write a lot of articles. You're mainly in sports. What made you want to go into that?
Yeah, so I grew up playing sports. That was like the kind of like one of the biggest things in my life. I played basketball since I was really little. I like traveled the country playing, and it came time for college, and I had talked to colleges about playing, and I actually committed to play at a college, and then like a couple months before, I kind of had some second thoughts and kind of decided that it was maybe not what I wanted to do. So very last minute, I decided I wasn't going to play basketball in college, and I was going to kind of like close that part of my story. And so from there, I was like, well, I mean, I have such a love for the sport and for other sports in general. So I was like, what career would allow me to keep up with that and still be a part of the sports world, even though I'm not necessarily participating anymore.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's how you decided into MMJ.
Yeah, and initially I thought, like, coming in, I definitely thought I was going to do, like, sports broadcasting, like, on-camera stuff, which is interesting.
It is.
And I actually do really like doing that, but for me, it was like, I was kind of more comfortable already. I had more experience in, like, the writing aspect.
Okay.
And, like, kind of, like, social media stuff. I had experience there, so it was just easy to, like, kind of go the safe route sometimes.
Yeah.
But I am working on that, and that's kind of, like, my biggest goal for, like, the rest of my senior year is to push myself and be more on camera and doing that side of things.
That's exciting, though,
Yeah.
that you find yourself perfecting a skill, but also pushing yourself outside the comfort zone, which is very important.
Yes.
So that's amazing that you got there by yourself. So that's great. So more on that, how difficult was it to make that decision, though? Like, to be in basketball your whole life and just be like, no, I'm just going to be behind the scenes and a writer.
It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I shed a lot of tears over that whole thing, and honestly, the biggest reason why I ended up not going is because it was far away from home.
Okay.
And I am very much a family person. Like, my mom and my dad are my best friends in the whole world. And I, at the time, was really struggling with my anxiety. And so, honestly, like, that's kind of how I ended up here. And I kind of had to make that choice because my anxiety wasn't really letting me do anything else. Okay.
So, has anxiety been, like, your biggest struggle throughout your career?
Oh, 100%. I started getting anxiety when I was, like, pretty young. And it started off where it was, like, I would get anxious whenever my parents would go out of town or something like that and, like, would leave me with a babysitter or something like that. Like, I would get really anxious. Even if it was, like, my grandparents watching me, like,
okay,
who I loved so much. I just, like, something about it made me so anxious. And as I got older, it kind of, like, changed. And, you know, it changed a lot, actually. And I still have anxiety to this day, but I've kind of found how to, like, manage it better. Mm-hmm. Not gonna lie. But it went from not necessarily even being, like, a specific thing. Like, I was once me being away from my parents when I was younger. It became like I had anxiety attacks and I had dealt with that from those things, that I literally would have anxiety over having an anxiety attack.
Oh, wow.
So, no, I mean, I really, really struggled. Like, in high school, like, I didn't really do a whole lot because I was so scared that, like, something would happen and I would have an anxiety attack and I would have to go home and it'd be a big scene, and I just hated the idea of that. So, and I mean, I feel like you know me. Like, I'm a very, like, outgoing person, and I love to try new things, but, like, change scares me. And things that I haven't done before scares me. And so, whereas now I'm a little bit better about, like, pushing myself to overcome that, whenever I was in high school, it really limited the things that I did. And like, that alone would kind of like break my heart, because I'm like, I know I would have so much fun doing this, but my mind just like doesn't let me.
That is something I think a lot of people, including myself, can relate a lot. So I do have a question. How did you start to overcome it?
So honestly, like, it's been a long battle. Like, I've tried so many different things. I've gone to different like therapists. I've tried like counseling and that sort of thing, and I've tried different anxiety medicines, and I mean, it's been a lot of trial and error, I think. Honestly, coming to college and like doing this experience really pushed me, and I think that's whenever things kind of started to turn the page, because there were so many new things that were happening to me, but I like got to the point that I was like, I can do this. And once I did, like, I ended up having so much fun, and I loved all this stuff, and that's whenever I felt like I was like truly happy. But I mean, and honestly, I grew up in the church, and that was something that like always was a big thing for me. I remember whenever I went through confirmation, I gave like my whole like faith speech.
Yeah.
And I talked about my anxiety and how that's like kind of the biggest thing for me. But I think leaning on the Lord is something that like really helped me through that process. And my mom, she reads a daily devotion every morning, and every day, like, she would find something in one of her devotions, and she would mark the page and bring it to me. And like little things like that really did make the biggest difference. And I think it's overall just been a big thing with like me growing up and maturing in the way that I think. But I mean, it was really a struggle for me growing up.
That is, wow, that's a lot to go through, and thank you for sharing that. I know it must not have been easy for you.
I've never really talked about it.
Yeah, I saw you. I'm like, oh my God. I like got a little emotional too. So during now that I do have like more of a curiosity. Being editor-in-chief is a lot, and sometimes it can be very stressful. How do you deal with anxiety while being in a position of leadership?
And that is a big struggle, and I think that's something that I've been kind of learning as I'm going to an extent, because kind of the way I got into this role was a little bit different than most, because I wasn't on staff last year. I had volunteered and I wrote stories and stuff, but I wasn't on staff, so I didn't really know how it all worked. So coming into this year, I really felt like kind of not prepared to an extent. And you know me, like, I'm such a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Like, I want everything to be perfect. And I kind of had to give up a little bit of that control and, like, surrender myself to the fact. And I was so open with everybody at the beginning. I was like, I'm learning as I go. Like, I will do my best on my part. But, like, to an extent, like, we're going to just see how this goes. And I do think, like, I feel so much better now, having gone through it for a couple months. I feel like I really understand how it all works, and I've learned how to work with each of our staff members, because, you know, from a manager standpoint, like, you do kind of have to, like, deal with each person differently.
Yes.
And so that's been another learning experience for me. But as far as anxiety, like, I think to some extent I kind of just had to, like... surrender myself, and just it's not always going to be perfect, and I've made mistakes, and that's that, but I think I've just gotten a little bit better about how I handle my anxiety now.
So I want to go into something a little bit, because I find this interesting. I found myself having this conversation a couple of days ago, how being a perfectionist, you also have to surrender things that you cannot have control of. Mm-hmm. And that within itself provokes anxiety sometimes.
Yes.
Like, let's get into that a little bit. This is off topic, but how have you dealt with that? Because that's hard.
And that's, you're so similar to me in the way that you think when it comes to stuff like that, because that has always been my thing. Like, I hate not being in control. Like, because if it's me who is in charge of things, I'm like, okay, I know it's going to go this way, this way, this way. And when somebody else is in control, I just, like, it stresses me out. And so that is something I still struggle with. And it's one of those things, like, growing up and even, like, since being in college, like, we'll plan a trip with, like, my friends or something. And I'm like, well, I think I should drive my car because then, like, if something were to happen, then, like, I would have a way to, like, leave early and blah, blah, like, that's just how my mind works.
Yeah.
And I, like, hate that because I feel like I always, like, have to, like, alter the plans a little bit. But that's just, like, something about being in control gives me comfort, which is, like, a blessing and a curse.
No, but I get that because, as you said, we're very similar in that aspect. And that's why I wanted to talk about it a bit, because having things in control gives you a sense of peace. Just because if something goes wrong, it's on me and I can make it work. But that's not how life works within itself. And just trying to trust the process, with that is like, how am I going to trust the process?
Yes.
But thank you for sharing that. So more into who are you and all the battles you've gone through to be here. Is anxiety been like your biggest issue to forming who you are and your mindset, or have you had other difficult things that have made you who you are right now, which is...
I mean, obviously, like, I've gone through things and I've battled things growing up, but I have been very lucky and I grew up very blessed to where I didn't have a lot to worry about, and even though I did, I found things to worry about. But I would say anxiety was kind of like the thing that, like, really I struggled with for years and years and years. And for a while I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of this. And even, like, when it comes to, like, relationships and things like that, like, I have always had, like, a really hard time, like, letting people in and, like, trusting people, because I think whenever I do let somebody in, like, that gives them the opportunity to see, like, the more vulnerable side of me. And
that's scary within itself.
That's scary. And so, like...
How have you managed that, though? Because you are in a relationship.
Yeah. And it came about in such a way. Poor guy.
Poor guy. I'm so sorry. No,
yeah. I had known him for a long time, and I honestly, like, he knows this. Like, my anxiety was just so bad. Like, I knew that I liked him, but I couldn't really make myself, like, go on a date with him or anything like that.
Oh, no.
And so, like, he tried for so long. And then finally, I was like, you know what? I know he's a good guy. Like, this is what I need to do. So, but that in itself was, like, the biggest step for me ever, because I was like, I don't want to hang out with anybody. I'm just going to stay by myself. But
you made it through, and you have, obviously I don't know him, but I've seen the pictures, and you guys are very much in love. So I love that for you.
Yes.
And I'm happy for you that you got over that and are able now to be able to have not just that relationship, but other friendships as well.
Yes.
That obviously it's still scary, because it's to me it's always going to be scary,
right,
to, like, get to know a new friend and trying to let them in, because you never know what it's going to happen. But given the chance, you are up to it now, you know?
Yeah. And I think another thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is, I think for so long growing up, I was like, I want to have all the friends I can have, and, like, I want to be friends with everybody, and I want everyone to like me, and that's just, I'm such a people pleaser, like, that's just, and when people didn't like me, it, like, struck me to my core. I hated that. And a lot of people don't like me, so, but I think as I've gotten older, I've learned that, like, I have, like, a small core group of people who, like, I know love me for me, and, you know, let me be my authentic self and truly care for me. And that is, like, that's my biggest piece of advice to people. I feel like I'm such a happier person now that I found my, like, people. And because it's not really worth, like, spending your time with people who don't make you feel good. And that's been another thing that I think I've learned growing up.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of people take for granted just having maybe 2-3 friends. That's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't need 10, 15 friends. That's something you understand once you get older.
Yes.
Just, you don't need a lot of friends.
Like, if I go out somewhere and I see people, I'm always going to be like, oh my gosh, hey.
definitely.
And I still have, like, friends, but it's different when it's, like, you're, like, people.
Yes.
And I think I've definitely found my people now, which is...
No, exactly. That's exactly what I mean, because you have friends that... like you can hang out and have fun and stuff, but when you're in the middle of something very strong emotionally for you, you just like can't really go to your hangout friends because they don't know that aspect of you. You just go to like your close people, right?
And that's even like bringing it back to anxiety. Like, that's almost kind of how I feel like I know that they're like true friends, is a lot of times like I would say something about my anxiety and people would kind of just like brush it off and
it's not something to brush off.
No, and it really is a struggle, and I think some people don't understand that necessarily, but the group that I have now, like, I have been able to really open up with and kind of like share my struggles, and then you find out that they actually deal with a lot of similar stuff.
Yeah.
And it becomes something that like you're open and honest about, and you can really say your feelings, and that is like, I mean, that's what friendships are for.
Exactly.
But I think it's so easy to get caught up in like the superficial, like, oh, like I have this big friend group, yada yada, and it's just like I wish I would have known sooner. I wish my younger self would have known, like, get your core people, and that's that.
Yeah, because I think you pretty much summed it perfectly. Just having those people there. And I think it's sad that a lot of people get caught up in the superficial aspect. I want to appear this way to people. And it's like, we all know that's not really who you are. Who really are you? That's actually who people should be friends with and get to know. And it's sad that sometimes we just focus on the superficial and just judge a book by its cover, which is not the point of life within itself.
Right.
So, thank you for that. A little bit more on anxiety and your advice. What advice would you give your younger self and people who struggle maybe with anxiety within a position of leadership or just in school in general?
You know, I would say especially to my younger self, whenever I went through it, and granted nowadays I think people are a little bit more open about mental health than they maybe were years ago, which is great.
Yeah.
But my biggest piece of advice would be like, don't be afraid to talk about it, because for so long I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, like if these people knew that I'm on anxiety medicine, like that would be so embarrassing. And I held so much in, and once I realized that like it was something that like when you talk about it, like it helps. It really does, and it's hard. But that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just like find your people, whether that's your family or your friends or it's a therapist, a counselor, whatever. Find your people you can trust, and open up to them and tell them how you're feeling, because chances are they're probably going through something similar.
Yes, and especially adding a little bit to that is that I've encountered, and I've done it myself, when you're going through something and you just go locked down and just hide and cry by yourself. That sometimes it's okay to do it like alone, but sometimes it's like you need someone, even if it's just a shoulder to cry on or just someone to listen. Even if you already know the solution and you already know what to do and what's going to happen, you just need to take it off your chest type thing. That's when you need those people too. So I wanted to add on that. So thank you for this episode. This was really, really good. I'm glad I got to know you a bit more and got some advice for myself as well.
Well, I maybe need to take my advice a little bit too, but
I think we can just put this episode on a repeat at some point. But
right. Whenever I'm struggling.
Well, it's fun. Thank you for sharing who you are, and I hope I get to learn more from you in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey,
I've had so much fun getting to know you.
Yes, we're gonna have so much fun in the future. So we're friends now. So, yay! Well, see you guys. See you in the next one. If you joined us today, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs some little inspiration. We'll be back next week for another incredible story. Until then, keep listening, keep learning, keep embracing the stories that are all around us. Thanks for tuning in to My Story Podcast.